Hello, I am Zinfogel. In this video, I will cover Latias' legendary arena and explain her combat mechanics to help you defeat her. Let's get started. Latias has a Dragon-type Special Sync. She starts the battle weak to Dragon, but changes her weakness to Fairy on her second health bar, and it remains that way for the rest of the fight. Latias is similar to Latios' legendary arena in a lot of ways. She has a couple partners in Flygon and Alakazam. Flygon is weak to Dragon, while Alakazam is weak to Dark. They specialize in physical and special damage respectively. It's recommended that you defeat them quickly because they start using scary attacks like Rock Slide or Hyper Beam. Latias' main gimmick are stat increases. She has a collection of passives that enhance or mitigate stat changes. Most importantly, she has a passive called Fluid Fortification. Fluid Fortification reduces any damage done to Latias depending on her net buffs. A net buff is a result of Latias' positive buffs minus debuffs. When Latias reaches 10 net buffs, she becomes completely immune to any damage. It is imperative that you bring stat increase control to counter Fluid Fortification. Outside of that, Latias is good at debuffing herself. She has Defense Crush 1 and several moves that lower special defense augmented by Honor Roll 2. When combined with Ripple Effect 9, Latias has AoE debuffs to drop your team's defenses. You should bring tanks with Unbending, Stalwart or Impervious to combat stat drops. Latias has the standard status and interference resistances for legendary arenas, though Latias attempts to counter status conditions with Safeguard and by setting up a status protection shield at the very end of the fight. Nothing too noteworthy happens on Latias' first health bar, except that she uses Mod Slap with Ripple Effect 9 to drop the party's accuracy. She only does this once, but it's fairly annoying to deal with if you don't have a Piercing Gaze, Impervious or Accuracy buffs to counter it. On Latias' second health bar, she opens with Sure Crit and Sure Hit Dragon Pulse. She also gains 3 stages of evasion and attack. Latias raises Light Screen and she starts using Calm Mind and Double Team to constantly boost her stats. Latias' mechanics change a bit here. She gains a couple passives called Slippery Slope 9 and Hemmed In 9. This means that when you miss moves against Latias, she gains evasion buffs, but if you connect attacks, her evasion drops instead. Although, the passive Piercing Gaze and moves that cannot miss, such as Swift or Aerial Ace, make this a non-issue. When you reach 50% health on this phase, Latias raises Reflect. She also buffs evasion by +6 stages and defense by +4. You have to watch out for physical damage, because Latias uses strong moves like Outrage, backed by Clear-Headed to eliminate self-confusion. On Latias' final health bar, she opens with Sure Crit and Sure Hit Earthquake, which can be problematic for your strikers if you don't do anything to drop Latias' attack. Lastly, Latias does nothing but strong special moves until defeated. You can use specialized tanks like Cheryl or Viola if you need one last team to take down Latias. Fluid Fortification is such a big threat in this fight that you cannot afford to not bring stat control against Latias. Fortunately, there is several sync pairs who debuff reliably. If you plan to bring debuffers for your main team, here I am presenting several examples. Focus on sync pairs who debuff multiple stats reliably and who can contribute in more ways beyond the debuffing. I want to highlight the Champion Iris and Hydreigon, because she is custom made for this encounter. Breaking Swipe and Snarl, backed by Double Drop, allow her to perform AoE attack and special attack debuffs to constantly pressure Latias and her cohorts. Besides Champion Iris, Professor Oak is your best free-to-play option. His innate Unfortuitous 9 passive allows his moves to drop any stat at random. If you use Inertia and Blind Spot on his Sync Grid, he can also deliver powerful Sync looks. Another strategy you should consider is opening the fight with a debuffing team. I recommend Janine for Venom Drench alongside Hapu for Mod Slap. The combination of -6 attack, special attack, speed, and accuracy should fully counter fluid fortification, even if your main team cannot drop stats. All of the aforementioned sync pairs can benefit from Defense Crush 2 as a lucky skill for extra debuffs. When choosing a tank, your first priority should be preventing Latias' stat drops. Focus your attention on tanks with access to Impervious. This passive stops debuffs from affecting the user, so your defenses will stay intact. Stalwart and Unbending can also act as a pseudo-Impervious. Your tank needs to be capable of buffing both defensive spectrums. Latias has a wide array of physical and special moves. I am presenting multiple examples of sync pairs who fulfill this criteria. All of these tanks benefit from Vigilance as a lucky skill to protect against Latias' sure crit moves. If you lack all of these gacha units or miss Sycamore's event, you can always fall back on the classic Skyla and Misty defensive core. Together, they buff both defensive spectrums and have plenty of recovery to help a strong striker defeat Latias. Just make sure to debuff Latias severely before resorting to this approach. As far as damage goes, Fairy-type strikers with Moonblast are particularly useful because this move has a 30% chance to drop Latias' special attack for an extra debuff. Piercing Gaze is also a good safety net to counter Latias' evasion buffs. Strikers who bypass enemy passives, like N or Solgaleo, can ignore fluid fortification altogether, but I still recommend debuffing Latias to make the battle easier. As per usual, I also want to briefly mention sleep chaining. Latias does open the battle with Safeguard, but you put her to sleep right away, she skips using it. Nothing is really stopping you from cheesing the rest of the fight with a sleep chain. Just watch out for Latias' final health bar because she raises a status protection shield when she reaches 50% health. For a more in-depth explanation on sleep chaining, I recommend checking out my Aself Legendary Arena tutorial. Alright, it's time for a few examples. First, I want to show you a free-to-play approach with Oak, Sycamore and Maylin. I think this is a really easy way to handle this encounter, although it is dependent on Sycamore, so if you don't have him, I am going to show you some alternatives in a little bit. However, Sycamore is absurdly broken and he eats Latias alive. Sycamore just has a unique array of perks that allow him to stand out as a tank. He's got Impervious to block stat drops, he's got Moonblast for super effective damage and a chance to debuff a special attack, he's got Hornleech to drain health when he needs to, he can buff a special attack, special defense and speed and give the party regeneration. I could go on and on and on, but Sycamore is just ideal for this encounter. He could even solo Latias. I think the better way to handle this is supporting Sycamore with your other team slots, so that if things go dicey, Sycamore can carry the rest of the fight if he needs to. To that end, I am bringing Oak as a debuffer. Remember that you have to counter fluid fortification with debuffs, and Oak is perhaps the best free-to-play debuffer in the game, because his passive Unfortunatus 9 allows all his moves to drop a stat at random, so you can use Thunder for big damage and debuffs, or Blizzard for AoE debuffs. He's just a really handy tool to have. And if you grid him, he also has Inertia and Blind Spot on his sync grid, and he can provide additional DPS with his sync nukes. Now, for the tier slot, that's up to your preferences, but I brought the crit support, so you could bring any other support who can provide that, like Phoebe, Sabrina, Torchic, what have you, but I think Maylin is a little handy because she can restore health with Drain Punch and provide additional debuffs with Rock Smash. Instead of Maylin, you could bring Cyrus, for example, for additional DPS, but the core of Sycamore and Oak should handle this battle just fine, regardless of the tier support you choose. Now for option number 2, this is probably your best bet if you have a really strong 5-star striker and a handful of free-to-play resources. So, the plan is bringing a sacrificial team to fully debuff Latias before bringing the main team. And I am being very specific about my choice of debuffs here. I am bringing Venom Drench plus Modest Lab. And the reason is that this is going to give us -6 attack, special attack, speed and accuracy. And this combination of debuffs is going to fully counter Fluid Fortification, even if your second team cannot bring debuffers. So that will allow you to assign slots to more defensive teammates to help you survive. With all that said, Venom Drench is such a good debuffing move because it's AoE as well, but it can only target enemies when they are poisoned. And Janine herself sucks at poisoning. She only has a 20% chance of proccing Hostile Environment 1 cross poison. So she really needs someone else helping her poison targets, because remember that Latias raises Safeguard at the very start of the fight, so you are on a timer, you don't have a lot of time to poison enemies. After Latias is all nice and crowd controlled, you can bring the main team. Here I am showing a cookie cutter example. You got Skyline Mist as a defensive core. They buff special defense, speed and evasion, and have potions and regeneration, so plenty of defense and recovery, and they have refreshes on their turn moves to refill your defenses if you need to, in case Latias drops them. And Red, you know, you're a standard striker, self-sufficient, very strong, buffs Creed, buffs all his offenses, so he can make do. And I don't think I need to show you the rest of the fight, it's just Red murders everything thanks to the debuff, so we can fully counter Fluid Fortification, and the rest is a story. And now for the solution where I ham-fisted free-to-play resources. Perhaps I could have done this a lot better, and I would change a few things in retrospect. But this is the first approach I came up with, that only use 3-star and 4-star story or gacha sync pairs, and no limited units. Whenever I make strats like this, I account for accessibility, because I want to future-proof them for new players. And don't get scared by the unit potential, because I am only using 1-5 grids, and in some cases I am not using grids at all, even though I am showing grids, because I want to make up the damage disparity from having invested on my own units. It's just a byproduct of being a day one player. I just have a lot of investment on a lot of things, but case in point, this is a very accessible strat because the roster is always available. And the first thing I thought of was removing the sides as quickly as possible, because they just start stacking buffs very quickly, so they get scary and they are very difficult to tank. And like, we have Viola here, who is a decent special defense wall, but who has limited recovery, and Drake, who is an okay defensive buffer, but offers little utility otherwise. But together, they buy Iris enough time to be able to take out the sides. Even with a 1-5 grid and no investment whatsoever, Iris is still fairly potent as a striker, with the caveat that she needs the lucky skill Listen Confusion or Clear-Headed to be able to use Outrage consistently. But if you put them together, then Iris can just take out the sides fairly comfortably. Although as the battle progresses, Iris just loses steam because we don't have any trainer moves to spam anymore, and you kinda just sit around just trying to chunk at Latias, but as long as you take a really good chunk of health out of her, you will be fine, because that is the point of the team. Just taking out the sides and then doing enough damage to Latias for a cleanup team to come and finish the rest, because ultimately this team is just not built for long-term survival. As for the second team, it's got a couple jobs. First off, it's supposed to push Latias down to the second hell bar, and it wants to do a bit more debuffing. So I'm choosing Venom Drench for the latter. It's an excellent move that drops attack, special attack and speed, so it's ideal for this encounter, but with the caveat that it needs the target to be poisoned for it to work, and Janine sucks at poisoning, so that kinda limits the setup into bringing a poison type striker. Fortunately, there is Koga, who is a story sync pair with Poison Fang. That's a 50% chance of proccing bad poison on the target, and he's also a potent striker when given special attack buffs. So I am bringing Lisa to round out the team for special defense buffs, as well as a special attack that Koga needs to succeed, and together they should do cleanup after Iris nicely. Now, Koga and Janine make a good pair because they activate a ton of team skills with one another, so that should give you a decent offensive and defensive boost. And the previous team already did a little bit of debuffing because it had Viola, who can debuff a special attack, but you still want to push a few more offensive debuffs on Latias so that the third team can tank a little bit more easily. And something that happens on the second Hellbar is that your main team will probably get obliterated here. But you want to attempt to Poison Fang Latias through the evasion, and also attempt to drop her evasion buffs through Slippery Slope 9. That's just a new mechanic on this phase. But as long as you push her down to the second Hellbar, you should be fine. Now, the third team is my classic legendary arena cheese. You got the Skyline Misty defensive core alongside Zinfogel Oak. Skyline Misty are only graded for 1-5 for some bulk tiles as well as terrain move NPR, and Skyline is slightly better as a tank in this instance because Latias' physical moves can get really scary, as well as the fact that she has higher HP, so she gains more recovery, and Oak is graded for inertia and blind spot. So I don't think I have to explain much here because with all the setup we did previously, this should be fairly easy. You just have to spam 3 actions per round just to plan the sync countdown, get to the sync nukes, and well, ultimately you are going to be able to get through Latias' second Hellbar. Now, your success with this team depends on how many potion NPRs you proc with Skyla, because you kind of have to tank out this horrible move that Latias has, which is the Sure Crit Earthquake, and that will put a severe dent on your team unless everybody has Vigilance. But if you proc enough potions with Skyla, then this team should be able to finish Latias, but you don't have to do that because there is a 4-team backup. Ultimately, this is a strong defensive core and they cannot lose Latias under the correct circumstances. Lastly, I want to show you a backup for the tier Hellbar, and this can even work for all the other approaches in case you need something to finish off Latias. So here we have Cheryl, Valerie and Torchic, a very unlikely trio, but they should take care of this fairly comfortably. So Cheryl is a very specialized wall because she tanks special damage very well, but she gets popped by physical damage. So she can tank this phase because after Latias uses Earthquake, she only uses special moves, so this is a very rare opportunity for Cheryl to tank. And Valerie is a decent striker here because she hits Latias' Squisher special defense, and she can also hit her super effectively to make up for the fact that her moves are horrid. And when given crit support from Torchic, she can do okay, like I cannot complain. Valerie can also buff a special defense, and she can drain health with Draining Kiss and keep herself healthy, while Cheryl uses healing on herself to keep herself alive. So yeah, ultimately, if you stack sinks well enough, Valerie can nuke Latias out of the field and finish off the battle. So yeah, that's about everything I want to show here. Hopefully with all these methodologies you have an easier time handling Latias, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's it. I hope to see you next time.